Man, what is up, Inside Out? Y'all doing all right tonight? Hey, y'all sound amazing. You sound amazing. I was able to stand kind of side stage over here and hear you guys sing, and you sound incredible. Thank you guys so much for being here. If this is your first time at Brownsbridge Inside Out, I'd like to say welcome. My name is Heath, and I'm so glad that you decided to join us here tonight. Hey, I have kind of a confession for you guys. Not as much a confession, just kind of like I'm just going to share with you something that is just real about me, okay? Like, I'm a skeptical person. Like, I'm the kind of person that if you tell me something or you share with me some piece of information that I don't know or an experience that you had that I haven't experienced, I'm kind of naturally more questioning and skeptical. Now, in my day-to-day life, it doesn't really come out that much, but I've noticed it more so really in a lot of my friendships than anything else. Because here's how it plays out. My friends will come to me and they will recommend something to me. And if I haven't already seen it, if I haven't already done it, if I haven't already tried it, if I haven't already tasted it, I will just be like, I'm out. Because I'm at the stage in my life where I feel like I probably know too much. And that's not a great thing. I'm not bragging on myself. I'm saying this is an area of my life where I'm like, I have to be more open to trying new things. Because oftentimes my friends will come to me and be like, oh man, have you seen the new season of Outer Banks? Have you guys seen the new season of Outer Banks? Yeah, my man right here is like, yes, it is fantastic. You know, and I'm like, nah, I've got enough shows. I don't need to watch that right now. I'm just kind of like, nah, pass, right? And so people are like, dude, but you're missing out on the show. Everybody's talking about it, and it's really popular. And I'm just like, nah. No need. Or they'll come back and be like, hey, have you tried this new restaurant? It is amazing. And I'm like, I have enough restaurants in my life. I'm not open to any more. I'm not taking restaurant applications. I don't get to eat at the restaurants I already like enough, so I don't want any new restaurants. I like the things that I like. And so I found myself in the situation where I'm not good at taking recommendations. And so maybe some of you in the room are in a similar place where you're like not really great at recommendations. You're not really the person that is open and willing to try things. But I also know there's a lot of you in the room who are the opposite, right? Like you're the person always trying new things, always testing stuff, always figuring out what's new, what's hot, what's cool, what is the next big thing. And you're the person in the room who's really great at recommending things. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to turn to the person next to you and tell them the last thing that you tried that you would recommend to them. Could be a restaurant, could be an album on Spotify, it could be a TV show, it could be a movie. But turn to the person next to you and tell them something that you recommend to them. You got 20 seconds. Go. All right. All right. By show of hands, how many of you guys just heard about something that you're gonna now go try? How many of you heard about something? I'll give it a shot. All right, that's pretty good. Honestly, it was more than I expected. I kind of expected nobody to try something new. That's a good thing. All right, now here's my next question. How many of you in this room are not gonna go try something new based off something you just heard? How many of you are like me in the room? Okay, cool. I appreciate your honesty. I see that hand. I appreciate your honesty. Here's the thing we're talking about. When someone recommends something to you for the first time, or sometimes for those of you in the room who are good at being on the other side of that, and you're recommending something to someone for the first time, there's these two things that come into play when you get a recommendation or when you give a recommendation, okay? There's two things that come into play. There's these two things right here. It's curiosity and confidence. If you receive a recommendation, one of two things is going to win over the other. It's either going to be curiosity wins and you want to try it, or your confidence wins and you may or may not, depending on where your confidence lies. Right? So like curiosity is this idea of believing in something before you fully understand it. Like let's say your friend sitting next to you just turned and recommended a new album on Spotify to you that you haven't heard yet. Depending on what you know about that friend, you could say, I haven't heard that. They know me, they're my friends. They say I would like it. Maybe I would. I don't really know the album. I don't really know that artist very well, but I'm curious. If they think I would like it, maybe I would. And if you're willing to try something, maybe that curiosity wins because you don't fully understand it, but you believe in it enough to give it a shot. But sometimes in your life, the confidence wins, right? Like if you don't have enough confidence in something, confidence is having this understanding that outweighs the belief. It's like, hey, like I already know that artist. I haven't liked anything they've ever put out on Spotify. So the fact that they came out with a new album doesn't convince me to go listen to it because I have full confidence that I've hated everything they've ever done and I'm going to hate their new album. Or like take it for instance. Kanye's been in a drought, right? Like he's trying to release Donda. He's doing this big thing at Mercedes-Benz, but he's been in a little bit of a drought musically. So maybe your confidence in hearing his new album is a little bit low because he hasn't put out anything good since like 2010. And so here's the thing. I said what I said. Here's the thing. Depending on where you fall in the curiosity or confidence scale depends on whether or not you're willing to try something. And so anytime there's a recommendation, you're going to have to decide, is my curiosity going to outweigh my confidence, or is my confidence in the person or the recommendation going to outweigh my curiosity? And sometimes it's both, but most of the time it's one or the other. And so we see this a lot in our faith, because in our faith dynamic is we will have questions about something. There's no one on planet Earth, no one that's ever walked on planet Earth that has everything figured out about God. Okay, so we all have curiosity when it comes to our relationship with God. There are things that we haven't figured out. Now, depending on how close you are to the relationship with God, maybe the confidence in which that you feel about those questions, right? Like you're like, hey, I don't have all my questions figured out, but God's done a lot for me, so I'm confident in him. He's got me, and whatever comes next in life, I trust in him. We're good. But there's some of you who have curiosities about God and questions about God, and you haven't seen him come through in your prayers. You haven't seen him deliver on the things that you're concerned about. Or maybe you've been in a string of bad things happening to you in your life, and your confidence with God could be at an all-time low. And so you walk into things of faith, and you're like, hey, I've got a lot of questions, but right now me and God feel far, far apart because my confidence is really, really low. Well, see, today we're going to look at a story of a couple people who were early followers of Jesus. And there's these two guys, and they wrestle with this curiosity and with the confidence. One guy seemed more curious, or one guy was more confident. And so we'll see both of these characters, because I think that most of us in this room at different times in our lives play both roles. And so early on in Jesus' day, when he began his ministry, you have to understand this thing about Jesus, is that he was not the Jesus that we all know and hear about today. You got to think about it. At some point in time, Jesus gave his first sermon. He couldn't rely on all the things that he had taught in the past. At some point in time, Jesus did his first miracle, and everybody hadn't seen and heard about this guy who's healing the sick and healing the blind and turning water into wine and walking on water. Like, he didn't have this reputation. So early on in Jesus' ministry, he was kind of a new guy that maybe there's some stories about, or maybe people were rumbling or hearing things about, but nobody really knew. And maybe their curiosity was at an all-time high, but their confidence was at an all-time low. And that's where we find ourselves in our story today. In John chapter 1, Jesus is starting to call his first disciples. He's begun his earthly ministry, and he's like, hey, I need some people to help me do this. And so he begins to call his early disciples. And if you've read the book of John, the first chapter of John, you'll know that some familiar names get called first. There's Peter and his brother Andrew, who, they pop up all throughout the story. There's James and his brother John, again, pop up all throughout the story. Peter, James, and John are kind of Jesus' inner circle. They're his closest friends. They are the people who, kind of get invited into Jesus' most intimate and personal moments in his life. And so these are some of the earliest followers. Well, today we're going to pick up with the next two guys that come along beside Jesus, guys that maybe you've heard of, maybe you haven't. So if you have your phone or you want to follow along in your Bible or whatever you're following along with, in John chapter 1, starting in verse 43, here's what it says. The next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, "Follow me." Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Now, Philip is the kind of the next guy in line to follow Jesus. And Jesus doesn't give him the whole game plan, right? Jesus kind of leans into this curiosity. He's began his ministry. He started to teach, and he's like, hey, Philip, why don't you come with me? Now, I don't know about you, but if I've only heard somebody, I don't expect any of you guys to hear me speak once and just be like, wow, everything that guy says, fantastic. Gonna come back every week. It's amazing, right? Jesus is kind of betting on himself to be like, hey, Philip, we've kind of met one time, but I see something in you, so why don't you just drop everything in your life, leave your family, quit your job, everything you're doing, and why don't you come and do ministry with me? It was kind of a big question that Jesus is asking from Philip, and immediately it was kind of this journey that they go on. This is because they're going to another town of Galilee, and so Philip's having to walk away from his job, walk away from his family, walk away from everything that he's ever known in order to follow Jesus. So here's what it says next. It says, Philip found Nathanael, so this is his friend Nathanael, and he told him, "We have found the one that Moses wrote about in the law, and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." And Philip's confidence in Jesus is amazingly high for a guy who he really kind of just met. And so he comes to Nathanael, he's like, "Hey, we found the guy, we found the Messiah, we found the person that we've heard about for centuries." And Nathanael, who's probably more like me, probably more like a lot of you in this room, has some questions. He's a little curious, like, what? He says, Nazareth? Can anything good come from there? Nathanael asked, he said, wait, you're talking about a guy from Nazareth? Now, I know none of you guys are probably from like ancient Israel because you live in Georgia, but like the thing with Nazareth is there's nothing special about it. He's from a small town. Now, growing up in like Cumming, Georgia, like a lot of you have, you could probably relate to growing up in a small town. But like it was so small and such like, it was like a hick town almost. It was like, man, has anything ever good come out of there? You know, I grew up in a very rural part of Alabama, and that's pretty much the whole state. And so it's this whole idea of like, I can imagine, like I would meet people and they're like, "Oh man, this guy's an amazing athlete. This person is a world famous scientist." And they would tell the town that they're from in Alabama. And I'm like, how? Like that is like a 1A school that's like K through 12 in one classroom. Like it is the littlest place in the world. How in the world can something good come from such a small and insignificant town? So in the story, I feel like I'm probably the Nathanael. I'm probably the guy that's like, "Hey, I'm not convinced. I'm curious as to like, are you sure?" You can almost hear it in his voice to be like, "This is the guy? Like, Phil, are you okay, man? Like, is everything okay? Like, are you confident from Nazareth? Like, are you serious?" And I love Philip's response because he doesn't argue with Nathanael. He doesn't present his case. He doesn't lay out the list of reasons why he thinks Jesus is the guy. He just says this. This is what he says in the next verse. "Come and see," said Philip. 3 little words. He says, "Come and see." Period. End of sentence. And I'm like, again, I relate a lot to Nathanael in the story. And if Philip comes to me and says, "Hey, we found the one, we found the Messiah, the promised one, God's son. He's here with us. He's from Nazareth." And I'm like, whoa. You already lost me at Nazareth. No, can you run me through, explain to me why you think this is the guy? And if my friend Phil comes back to me and says, "Dude, just come and see. You just got to come and see," I would be honestly out at that point in time, as would probably many of you. But the amazing thing about Philip in this story is that he has so much confidence in Jesus and so much confidence in who Jesus is that he isn't banking on his argument. He isn't banking on his ability to convince Nathanael. He's basically just saying, "Hey, you got to see it for yourself." And if you've ever been recommended something from someone and they haven't tried to convince you and they haven't told you all the reasons why you should watch this show or why you should try this food or why you should, give this person a shot in your dating life. If you've ever, had someone just like, "You just got to try it." For me, that's almost more compelling than you laying out your arguments, right? Like a few years ago, I had a friend of mine who took me to this restaurant. I had never been to this restaurant before. Again, I'm from rural Alabama. Like we ate like everything was fried, mostly chicken and vegetables kind of thing. Like I'm not like a cultured human being. So I was like, I was just out of college, I think. And he took me to an Indian restaurant for the first time. He's like, "Dude, you like spicy foods, right?" I was like, "Yeah, I love spicy foods." And he's like, "Buckle up because this is going to blow your mind." And I was like, okay, like I've had a lot of like really spicy hot wings before. So I think I know. Some of you guys were at VR a couple years ago and watched me almost throw up on stage eating hot wings. And so like maybe you remember that I'm really good with hot stuff. And it was one of those situations where I was really confident in myself, in my experiences. And he was like, "No, I'm going to show you some hot stuff. I'm going to show you some hot foods." And my friend, he was from the Middle East, and so he'd try to, this is how he grew up eating and stuff. So he took me to his favorite like Indian restaurant, and he told the waiter, he's like, hey, here's my friend Heath. It's his first time. He doesn't know anything. He's never tried it. He's a rookie here. And he told me, he said, this is, the kind of the base level of how something hot is. And then by the stuff on the menu, there's little flames to talk about how hot it gets. And it went up to like 4 or 5. So I was like, all right, I'm pretty good at this kind of stuff. Let me just start with a 3. And the waiter was like, like giving me the look, the look when you order something, and the waiter's like, no, you don't want to do that, right? And I was like, no, it's okay. Like, I've had hot wings. And he was like, oh, okay. And so he brought this stuff out, and I took one bite, and I had to tears running down my face. I was on fire, and I was like, I need a half a flame. I don't need to even go, I need to go back to 0 flames. I started at 3. I was way more confident than curious. And in this point in my life, I needed to be more curious than confident. And what I learned from that story is that so many times in our lives, we find ourselves being overly confident in ourselves and underly curious in what could happen or what's down the road. And so I admire the way that Philip responds to his friend Nathaniel, who's very confident, like, hey, dude, let me just stop you right there. Nothing from Nazareth is ever going to amount to anything. It's a little town. Nothing ever good has come from there. I don't think this is the guy. Like, I think you've been duped, right? Like, he's like, I don't think this is going to work out. But I love how Philip, he doesn't lay out an argument. He doesn't push back. He doesn't fight. He doesn't try to convince anyone. He's just like, all right, man, just give it a shot. Why don't you do these 3 words? He says, you should come and see. Come and see. When I was in college, I had a friend of mine who led a Bible study. And it was a Bible study intentionally aimed at people who had a lot of questions about faith. And so when we started this Bible study, there was a lot of people that showed up really to kind of like poke holes in like Christianity and like poke holes in like believing in God and poke holes in the life of Jesus. And they kind of came with this like posture of, we're going to blow this up. And it's going to be kind of messy. So a lot of the things we talked about in there are controversial topics and really difficult things for people to discuss. And there was this one guy, and he came every single week. And every week, whatever we talked about, he was against it. Whatever the topic was, he was like, I believe the exact opposite. Like this could not be true. And eventually, it got to the point at the end of it was like an 8-week Bible study, where the guy who led it was just like, hey man, I'm curious. Every week you come and you tell us you don't believe in any of the things we talk about, and every week, whatever the topic is, you disagree with everything I say. I'm just curious, why did you keep coming? If you disagree with everything and everything is wrong and you don't agree with anything, why keep showing up every week? And he said, I grew up in a church where no one allowed me to ask questions. And so the fact that you told there was a Bible study where we could come with our questions, I was ready. So I wanted to come. Like, I was like, okay, well, that's great. Like, I want this to be kind of a place where you can show up with your questions and you can ask questions, and that's awesome. But he said, I don't understand why, after a couple weeks, you kind of kept coming and stuff. And he said, well, I kept waiting on everyone here to realize that I didn't belong and ask me not to come back. So this guy was so confident in what was going to happen that he showed up to this Bible study every week, intentionally just going against the grain, intentionally just like trying to like be difficult so that the Bible study leader would get fed up and ask him to leave and not come back. And I'll never forget, the Bible study leader's name was Brian. He kind of leans up in his chair and he kind of gets, not in this guy's face, but he gets kind of close to him and he's like, hey, no one here belongs any more or any less than you. And I remember hearing that and thinking like, oh, that's not true. This guy doesn't believe anything. Like this couldn't be more wrong. This guy, he literally doesn't believe in God and he literally doesn't believe in what we talk about. And are you sure? Like, I think you need to rethink that sentence. But the guy said, he asked, he's like, what? And he said, no one here belongs any more or any less than you do. And he said, I want you to understand that this should be a place where you don't have to believe in everything in order to belong. And essentially, that's the exact same thing that we want Inside Out to be. We want Inside Out to be a place where we can all belong here before we believe. If you're new here, this is your first time, and you have questions about God, or maybe you have confidence in the things about God that you don't believe, or maybe you have confidence in things about church that you don't like, or the things that you don't want to be a part of, hey, I want you to know that there's no one here that belongs any more or any less than you do. If you've been coming here since the day you were born and you grew up in Wambaland and Upstreet and Transit and you've been coming Inside Out and you're the most bought in, sold out Brownsbridge kid in the world, I want you to understand that no one here belongs any more or any less than you do. Because what we want Brownsbridge Inside Out to be is a place where all of us can belong before we believe. That you should have the acceptance and love from the people sitting around you, regardless of where you are in your faith journey. Because what that allows for us to do is to walk in here into this place with a curious mindset, to have questions about God, to have questions about our faith, to have questions about where we are in our faith journey. And we don't have to worry about being judged, being talked about, being looked at differently, or like my friend from college, being asked to not come back because you're not good enough. And the sad reality is that so many times in churches, we kind of get this backwards, where we tell you, hey, after you believe all the right things, now you can become one of us. And what we want to be here is the kind of place that gets it right, that it has the same mindset that Philip does. It's like, hey, you don't have to have all your questions answered. You don't have to believe that anything good can come from Nazareth. You don't have to believe that Jesus is the guy who he says to be. He is. All we want you to do is to come and see. Come try it out. Come give us a shot. Come belong, even if you don't believe. And this is such an important thing because next Sunday night is our back to school bash. And if this is your first time in Inside Out, or first time in a long time, or maybe this is your first year in Inside Out, or you had a weird year last year because of COVID, but our back to school bash is designed to be an event that's the easiest thing in the world for you to invite a friend to. That you don't have to have all their questions answered. You don't have to be a Bible expert. You should be able to walk in and say, hey, I want you to come to church with me on Sunday. We're having this really cool back to school event. There's going to be food. There's going to be games. It's going to be awesome and a ton of fun. And them push back, tell you all the reasons why they can't come, and you say, hey, just come and see. Why don't you just come and check it out? And that can only be possible if we create a place where they don't have to worry about how they're going to be judged, how they're going to be talked about, how they're going to be looked at, how they're going to be feeling when they leave here. So, your challenge this week is twofolds. Number one, what in your heart and what in your life needs to be different and needs to change in order for you to become more welcoming to those around you? Maybe we talked about this a little bit last week, is that, hey, this is a place where everybody can belong. Maybe you need to actually believe that and start living that out. Making this a place where people feel welcome and a part of Inside Out. The second thing that I want you guys to do is I want you to find somebody who is an outsider. And next Sunday, I want you to bring one person. I just want you to bring one person. If you have to, tag team with a friend and y'all both get one person here. But every single person, I want you to bring one person who maybe doesn't go to church. They don't have a faith of their own. They don't know Jesus. They don't know that they can belong here and they can experience the benefits of this place, even if they don't believe. And what I want you to do is not to come in overconfident, not to come in and be like, oh man, you have to be there or else, God's going to be mad at you. No. This is not that kind of thing. We want to have the same posture that Philip has. They're going to have questions. They're going to have doubts. They're going to push back on you in some way. Trust me. They're going to have a reason. They're going to have an excuse. Your job is not to get them here. Your job, just like Philip, is to say, hey, you just got to come and see. Things are a little bit different. So my question for you guys is this as you head to small group. Who are you going to bring next week to Back to School Bash? Because every single person in this room is in charge of making this a place where you can belong. And every single person next week is in charge of bringing somebody who doesn't go to church, who doesn't have a home, who doesn't have a place where they belong. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I know so many students right now are thinking about that one person that they go to school with. Thinking about that teammate, that friend that lives in their neighborhood. Some of them are thinking about that guy who hasn't been to Inside Out in 2 years. Some of them are thinking about that girl who left Inside Out because of the drama in her group. Some of them are thinking about the kid they sit next to in class who they have no idea where they are in their faith journey. Everybody's thinking about somebody right now, God. And so, Lord, I pray that tonight, as students head to small group, as they head to their discussions, Lord, that first of all, we make this the kind of place that everyone feels welcome, everyone feels like they belong, everyone feels like that they're a part of Inside Out. So much so that next week, we introduce and invite a whole new group of people who don't have a place like this to come and experience what you're doing. God, our confidence isn't in ourselves, our confidence is in you. And Lord, I pray that next week, so many students show up to Inside Out to come and see what church can be like, to come and see who Jesus is, to come and see what he did for them. That's our prayer. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.